Hello friends! For today, it's the first quarter wrap up. So all the books that I've read during the first 3 months of the year, January through March. First up we have Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. This is it is a first contact with aliens, although it's unclear of exactly who the aliens are. So which group are the aliens? We don't know. When humans start destroying Earth, we begin to explore the universe and finding planets that are suitable enough that we can start to terraform on and make habitable. And one such world, called Kern's World, was a terraformed planet, but it was also the site of an evolutionary experiment that goes terribly wrong. So the experiment was meant to be performed on monkeys that were brought from Earth to be on this planet. But it goes wrong. Instead, this experiment is carried out on the invertebrates that they brought with them as well. And the experiment works most successfully on the spiders. And so this experiment creates these giant, intelligent, sentient spiders. And then back on Earth, several generations later, we have successfully destroyed Earth. It is no longer habitable, and so the last remaining groups of humans find old spaceships and they take to the stars trying to find those planets that their ancestors had once terraformed, to try and find one that survived, that was successful, somewhere that they could colonize. We follow both the humans and the spiders through thousands and thousands of years and generations, and watched them struggle for survival. I really enjoyed this one. I gave it 4 stars. The world building was incredible. The story was also very believable, even though the biologist in me knows that it's not how evolution works, but in terms of a fictional story and how it was laid out and developed, it was believable in this scenario, at least. And because we got the perspectives of both groups, I had no idea which side I wanted to succeed. When I was reading about the humans, I wanted them to succeed. When I was reading about the spiders, I wanted them to succeed. And I didn't know throughout the whole book, not even at the very end, who I was rooting for the most, because the stories and the struggles were just so well developed, and I didn't know. So again, I thoroughly enjoyed this one. It is technically part of a series, or at least a duology. I know there's a second book, but you could actually read this as a standalone, because the story within this book does wrap up at the end, but it does kind of give you breadcrumbs into something that can happen in the future if you wanted to continue on with the series. Then we have Storm Clouds Rolling In by Ginny, and this was my first DNF of the year. This was recommended to me by my Nana, and she was right in thinking that it was something I would potentially enjoy, because apparently I had it on my Kindle archived from who knows how many years ago, but it just didn't work for me at all. I only read the first 2 chapters. Well, I read the prologue and the first chapter, and then I just cut it out. So this book is inevitably compared to Gone with the Wind, in that we're following the daughter of a wealthy plantation owner around the time of the Civil War. One thing this book does do better than Gone with the Wind is its accurate, or at least more accurate, portrayal of slavery. So this book does not shy away from the atrocities of that time. It opens up with a young slave boy hiding in a field while he watches his father be beat and hung for rebellion. So that part, I was happy that it didn't just kind of gloss over it, but that's really where my praise ends. First off, the writing was terrible, which immediately puts me off any book. Even if I don't like a storyline or characters, if the writing is good enough, I can usually carry on with it, but this one didn't even have that. And then on top of that, my main issue was with our main character, which, at least in the 2 chapters that I read, it very well could have changed later on, but the 2 chapters I read, she was simply just, you know, the pretty little white girl who loves her slaves. And I just, no, I couldn't do it, so I didn't. Then we have The Once and Future Witches by Alix E. Harrow. This is a book that combines witchcraft with the suffragette movement. We follow 3 sisters who are fighting their way back to each other while rediscovering the power of witching that mirrors the power found in the quest for civil rights. I gave this one 3.75 stars. It was more than okay, but I didn't quite like it. The writing was beautiful, and I think I would have liked it a lot more had I been able to physically read it with my eyes, but the only version of it I had available to me was an audiobook, which I really didn't like. I did not like that narrator. Her voice just kind of threw me off and I didn't care for it. So I think in the future, no time soon, but in the future I think I would like to reread it, but actually physically read it and see if that makes a difference. But again, it wasn't a bad book, and I understand why people love it so much, and I think I would love it more upon rereading and actually reading it. A Wolf First Vow by Karah Sutton. Zima, a young wolf, goes to the witch Baba Yaga to help save her family from humans, but Baba Yaga has plans of her own and tricks Zima into swapping bodies with her. In the form of Baba Yaga, Zima meets a young village orphan who has also come for the witch's aid. Soon all 3 of them must band together to save both the forest and the kingdom. This one was okay. I gave it 3 stars. I really don't have much else to say about it. I had high hopes for it because it was compared to The Girl Who Drank the Moon by Kelly Barnhill, which is one of my most favorite middle grade books, and maybe even books in general. I really loved it. But this one just kind of fell short of my expectations. So, meh. There's not really much I can say about other than it was okay. We have The Love Hypothesis by Hazelwood. This is my first and only 5-star read so far this year. This was the January pick for the Story Continued book club, and we follow PhD candidate Olive, who gets herself into a fake dating relationship with one of the biology department's professors. And as with all fake dating rom-coms, the fake relationship starts to feel a lot more like a real one, and then chaos ensues. I had so much fun with this one. I loved every minute of it. I finished it in 2 sittings, and I probably would have finished it in 1 had the sun not disappeared. Her writing style is so addictive, and it just sucked me in right from the very beginning. I loved all the characters, and it had a nice plot, but I think what I loved about the book was not necessarily about the book. It was more of my own reminiscing about my grad school days with all of my TA friends and our drunken graduate seminars, and which were all throughout this book, and I loved every minute of it. Though it's not without its faults. So Olive falls somewhere on the ace spectrum. She's not fully asexual, so maybe the correct term is demisexual, I'm not sure. But she doesn't feel sexual attraction unless she really feels like she knows a person and she feels comfortable around them. But all throughout the book, Olive would consistently voice that there's something wrong with her because of it. And I normally wouldn't make that big of a deal about it, except that this was a pretty main focus of the book. It was brought up a lot, and I didn't like the way that was presented because there's nothing wrong with it. It simply is what it is. It's not good or bad. That's just it. That's just how it is. So I didn't care for that point. And then we also had the one sexy time scene, which was the only word I can think to use to describe it was uncomfortable. It was consensual, but maybe borderline not. I don't know. Honestly, I don't know why it makes me uncomfortable, because it's not like it's my first smutty romance I've ever read. It's just, I don't know, it was uncomfortable. But the scene was pretty short and it only happens one time, so. Fortuna Sworn by KJ Sutton. Fortuna is a living nightmare, and she and her brother are the last surviving members of their species. Nightmares have the power to bring forth your worst fear and use it against you. But Fortuna's brother goes missing, and the trail has long since gone cold until a mysterious and powerful fae offers her a bargain she can't refuse in order to get her brother back. I gave this one 3.75 stars. Again, it was okay. It was a little more than okay. I did like the magic system and the lineage found within this book, and the plot was okay. I think my main problem is that I really just didn't care for a main character, so that kind of usually puts me off on a book. And I'm uncertain of whether or not I want to continue with the series. So I don't know, I might give the second one a try and see if it gets any better, but for now I'm just kind of take it or leave it. The Death of Jane Lawrence by Caitlin Starling. Jane finds herself in need of a marriage of convenience with a man who will allow her to still live an independent life of her own choosing. She has chosen the city surgeon, Augustine Lawrence, who accepts her offer with one condition. She is never to be in his old family estate after sundown. She agrees with no problem, but a carriage accident on their wedding night forces her to remain for the night, where she finds her new husband completely altered. I did not like this book. I gave it 2 stars. The only thing that this book did well was creating a spooky gothic atmosphere with pretty grotesque descriptions and imagery, but other than that, it was not good. The romance was completely unconvincing, and the storyline was so convoluted and confusing that absolutely none of it made sense. Point Pleasant by Jen Archer Wood. Ben is a best-selling horror writer inspired by a childhood encounter with his hometown's resident monster, the Mothman. After a fight with his best friend Nick, Ben leaves Point Pleasant, West Virginia, and does not return until 13 years later, when it appears that the Mothman is making a comeback. He then teams up with Nick, who now happens to be the sheriff, the town drunk, and a psychic to try and solve the mystery. This was February's pick for the Story Continue Book Club, and it was originally published as a supernatural fan fiction. I had high hopes for this one because of that. At one time, supernatural was a pretty big part of my life, though I am a terrible fan and I have yet to actually finish the series. So I still don't know how it ends, but I am currently making my way back through all 15 seasons so that I can finally have some closure. So if you watch Supernatural, please do not give me any spoilers, because somehow over the last, how long has it been, 3 or 4 years since the show ended, and I have somehow miraculously abated any spoilers. So please don't give me any, because I am, again, currently working through all of it to give it the respect that it deserves. But yes, I'm a bad fan, even though at one time I was a very big fan. Overall, I liked the plot and the mystery, and I loved how much Supernatural made it into the final book, and I really enjoyed being able to actually be a part of the hunt rather than just watching it happen. So for instance, we actually get to read some of the websites and the books during research rather than just being told what was found. So I enjoyed that aspect of it. But I hated the romance in this book. I would have been much happier if Ben had ended up alone. It was such a toxic relationship between Ben and Nick, and I did not like it. And then the whole story wraps up, and then the book still has about 30 to 50 pages left. And I will admit that I didn't read those last 50 pages or so. I just kind of skimmed through it because they were completely unnecessary, and I'm pretty sure that they had those pages in there just so that they could have a truly supernatural scene in a motel. So while I really wanted to love it, and some parts of I did, overall I just didn't. So I gave this one 3 stars, and I'm actually kind of sad about it. And it was a really hard 3 stars for me to give. The Hatmakers by Tamzin Merchant. Cordelia belongs to one of the last remaining maker families who create enchanted items using magical ingredients. Cordelia's father is lost at sea, and she wants nothing more than to find him. But instead, she finds herself in the middle of an ancient rivalry between families and forced with the responsibility of stopping a coming war. I gave it 4 stars. The writing was incredible, and if I were basing my rating just on the writing, it would have been an instant 5 stars from the very beginning. So the book opens up with this sentence. It was a wild and lightning-struck night, the kind of night that changes everything. Jagged forks of light ripped across the sky, and thunder rolled in tidal waves over the rooftops and spires of London. And the entire book is filled with beautiful quotes like that. And so the writing was phenomenal. It really was. The world was so very magical and whimsical, but the characters and the overall story plot weren't great. So I would say the writing is 5 stars, and the characters and the stories were 3 stars. So I kind of met in the middle and gave it overall 4 stars. Although I will say the audiobook was amazing as well. It's narrated by the author, which I always really enjoy because it really lets you hear the story the way that you know the author meant for it to be heard. If you read it, I do recommend the audiobook. Then March's book club pick was The Song of Achilles by Madeline Miller. This is a Greek mythology retelling of the romance between childhood best friends Patroclus and Achilles. There's really no plot, we just follow these two throughout their lives, which a good chunk of happens during the Trojan War. I gave this one 3.5 stars. The writing was nice, but I really found myself bored throughout most of this book. I also didn't like the love story because for me, I didn't think that it was romance. That was at least convincing because it was really just quiet, meek little Patroclus following arrogant Achilles around like a lost puppy. This book was also full of toxic masculine pride, which I get enough of in my everyday life that I really don't want it in my escapism. And this one had it in nearly every single male character in this book, and this book was full of male characters. And while I do understand this is a me issue and not necessarily an issue with the book, especially given the time period that the book was set in, I do understand that, but I just, because of how much I love Circe, I had such high hopes, and I just found this one overall underwhelming. So, but I did give it that half a bump up from 3 stars to 3.5 because I did actually like the ending. So the ending did give it a little bit of a boost. Then we have The Dollmaker of Krakow by R.M. Romero. In this we have a living doll, Carolina, who is in the land of the dolls. And the land of the dolls is a place where the toys of children who are either lost, broken, or just forgotten about, the souls of those dolls go to live the rest of their lives in the land of the dolls in their newly reformed, perfect bodies. And typically everything in the land of dolls is nice and peaceful and calm and everybody's happy. But they are overthrown by rats who want to come in and destroy and eat everything. So all of the houses and the trees and the flowers are all made of candy in the land of dolls. And the greedy rats want to come in and take it all. Carolina finds this magical wind that helps her escape the land of dolls during that time of war. And so it blows her back into our world. So Karolina finds herself in a new body in the shop of a doll maker in Krakow, Poland, who has unknowingly used magic to call forth Karolina and bring her to him. And they befriend a Jewish man and his young daughter. And we just follow them try and do all that they can to help their friends and the other people in their community during the start of the Nazi invasion of World War II into Poland. I'm not sure how I want to rate this one. I probably will likely give it 4 stars, maybe 3.75. It was at times hard to get through because of the subject matter, but this is a middle grade book, and I think that it handled it well. I think it didn't really gloss over too much of everything that was horrible about that time period, but it didn't do it in a way that was going to be too scary for the children that are reading it. I think the overall message was actually quite positive, as far as it was more of a hopeful story than some other books written about the Holocaust. So overall, I did enjoy this one. Okay, and then finally, the last book I read was Anne of Green Gables by L.M. Montgomery. I think we kind of all know what Anne is about. We follow Anne Shirley, who is a young orphan girl, and she goes to live with Matthew and Marilla Cuthbert at their farm, Green Gables. We follow her adventures and her mishaps as she grows throughout life. And I really, actually, very much enjoyed this one. Classics aren't usually my favorite books to read, but I loved this one. I don't know if I love it quite as much as I love the Netflix show Anne with an E, but I very much loved this one, and I was actually really surprised by that. I thought that it was still quite heartwarming and charming and funny and sweet and a little bit sad, and it just kind of had that whole range of emotions that kind of makes it a nice, well-rounded story. I do want to continue reading at least the next 2 books in the series that I have in my little collection book. So I think I would give this one 4 stars for sure. Pretty solid 4 stars, because I really enjoyed it. And that's it. Those are all the books I've read so far this year. I thank you so much for being here, and I hope that means I see you soon.